Mr. Robert Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Residents in Northpoint House, in my constituency in Bromley, have ACM cladding on their building. They are paying out £5,000 a week for a waking watch. Repairs, remediation will cost £3 million. They have a fire brigade enforcement notice expiring on the 30th of April. The flats are valueless. They cannot raise the money against them. The freeholders and the developer, despite personal intervention by the Secretary of State, for which I am grateful, refuse to accept liability. Under those circumstances, will the government accept it may be necessary to intervene directly to ensure that those innocent flat owners are not out of pocket?
Well, can I say to my honourable friend, first of all, he's obviously raised a very important issue, and I know, as he said, he's been in touch with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government and also with the Treasury about this. We, as I've said previously, we do fully expect building owners in the private sector to take action, make sure appropriate safety measures are in place and not to pass costs on to leaseholders. And we've written to all relevant building owners reminding them of their responsibilities. They must do the right thing, and if they don't, we're not ruling anything out. I would also point out to my honourable friend that local authorities have the power to complete works and recover the costs from the private owners of high-rise residential buildings. But I'm sure that a minister from the MHCLG would be happy to meet with my honourable friend to continue to discuss this matter to ensure that the residents are given the peace of mind they need by the action being taken.
Well, the thing that I've been particularly exercised about this week is something I raised in Prime Minister's questions, which is the position of residents of a tower block in my constituency, which has got the ACM Grenfell type cladding. So there's about 59 odd apartments affected there.
And this is the Northpoint.
This is Northpoint
Tower, yes.
In Bromley, yeah.
And this is actually an issue we have covered on this programme in the past, and it's been raised a number of times in Prime Minister's questions. And we've heard from the Secretary of State, James Brokenshire, that, you know, the government is putting moral pressure on the freeholders of these privately owned towers to try and get some action, but very little seems to be happening.
Well, that was the gist of what I was saying to the Prime Minister, that although I entirely agree with the government's objectives, that the people who get the largest benefit should pick up the tab for this, in practice moral pressure isn't enough, because most of these freeholders, if they are not prepared to willingly pick up the tab, have a get-out clause in their leases, which enables them to pick up the costs of remediation and pass it on to the flat owners.
And so people realise, how big a problem this is for the people actually living in these buildings. At Northpoint, we are talking about £75,000 per flat, aren't we?
That's right. So across all of those flats, 2.5, 3.5 million, the flats, of course, are worthless at the moment, because you could never get a mortgage on them, you could never borrow against them. So they've got no hope of raising that kind of money.
You mentioned the moral pressure. The actual Bill Proctor, who is the director of the company called Citystead Limited, which actually owns the freehold in this building, he wrote an email to the people who own these flats earlier this year, which I believe you were actually copied into. And in that, he says, councils know, as the government does, that it is highly unlikely that they will be able to achieve secure repayment from us because of the legal position. So essentially the freeholder in this case saying, you can't really touch us, the law, there's no legal requirement for us to pick up this cost. So what are you saying to the Minister? What pressure are you applying?
Well, regrettably that's the case, and pretty extraordinary when you think that actually the firm behind Cityscape is the Tchenguiz Family Trust. Multi-billionaires, and they're not prepared to put their hands in their pockets to help first-time buyers and retired persons. It's absolutely disgusting. But to take things swiftly, one option is for councils to do the work, but they need to have a guarantee that they would actually be paid, and that will be no good if people like Cityscape simply pass on that cost that the council charges onto the flat owners. So what I'm saying is the government may need, in these exceptional circumstances, to directly fund the flat owners, give them a one-off grant so that the works can be carried out by their management company, because we pledged that the flat owners, who are the innocent victims on this, would not be out of pocket. And that's what we've got to do urgently.
Well, this is one that we will keep watching.